This is David Stark from Watcher Pass, your site for movie news, reviews, deals, and recommendations. Today I'm joined by Mr. Charles Mruz, who is the director of the brand new indie documentary Gamemaster. It's a look into the thriving board game industry, and it follows the journey of 4 independent game developers as they try to get their game made. It's a fantastic documentary. I really loved it. It's very similar to one of my other favorite documentaries, Indie Game the Movie. In the review, I actually called it Indie Board Game the Movie because it's has a lot of similarities and differences, which we will talk about now. But Mr. Charles is on the line as well. And how are you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
So this movie just came out. Obviously, we all know there's a global pandemic and everyone is kind of stuck at home.
Hmm.
I guess on the one hand, that's a benefit because it's available digitally on pretty much every major distributor. So you can go out and you don't have to go to a movie theater. You can just watch it from the comfort of your home, rent it, buy it, see it as many times as you want. But was this movie always planned to go digitally? Was there some sort of theatrical plan that got derailed? How has it been releasing a movie in this, trying times, pandemic times, whatever you want to call it?
Well, one thing that's nice is that I know that everybody's got time to watch it right now, so that's kind of nice. But I think the grand plan, way back before any of this happened, we knew it was primarily going to be a digital release, but we had ideas of doing select screenings, special screenings here and there. We thought maybe if we were lucky enough, maybe it'll get to play a week in certain cities. But nothing's playing right now, so that's not happening at the moment. We still may do special screenings in way down in the future when, when all of this is done and people get to go to movie theaters and everybody feels good about it. But for now, this is most of the plan.
Oh, it's not a bad plan. I guess you could try to do what those independent film directors did. I don't know if you read the story, but they rented out a movie theater that was closed and they just rented the entire box office for the day.
I have
Everybody
heard of
get,
that story. Yeah, great, good for them. Good for them for thinking of it.
yeah. But, I think for this movie, it kind of makes sense to be digital. You can watch it with your game night. You can watch it at home with your friends and family. And it really is just a wonderful dive into the board game industry. I think I was most impressed by just the breadth of game designers that you're able to talk to. You had people from all different levels in the games industry with very different ideas. I guess, how'd you go about finding everyone and convincing them to be part of your documentary?
So there's two ways to look at it. So the people who are more known or have made more known board games, have been around in the industry for a long time. They were a lot easier to find because they're known entities, and for the most part, if you just tell them who you are, what you're doing, politely ask. We had a sizzle reel, very different from the trailer that you see now because we didn't have half the footage, but a very nice sizzle reel that we showed people like, hey, we're a legitimate production. This is what we're doing. A lot of people were very welcoming, very into being a part of the documentary. As far as finding, new people who may not be as well known, we went to conventions, local conventions in LA and, around, you go to the place where the people are, you start asking questions. If you see a board game you like, yeah, yes, you say, hey, tell me about your game. And then I always ask the question, why did you make it? And depending on what their answer was to that question, if there was a good reason, if it was, personal to them in some way, then discussions continued. There is one really exciting story about how we found people, and that story is actually with Nashr Balagamwala. So Nashr Balagamwala, I'm assuming that most people haven't seen the movie yet, but Pakistani girl, in here in America on a visa. She made a board game about avoiding arranged marriages because in Pakistan there's arranged marriages. That's the thing there, and so it's opens up the discussion of like, this is what Southeast Asian girls go through. This is what's expected of them, and it's a real fascinating game, and we dive into that in the documentary. But we were traveling across country for the documentary, interviewing people, in different states, eventually ending up at Gen Con in Indianapolis. And when we were in Connecticut because one of the producers, Wally Schross, his parents live in Connecticut, so we were stationed there for a second. I was at a Starbucks, going through footage, working out questions and stuff like that. And I came upon an article. I wish I remembered the publication, but I came upon an article about Nasra Balagamwala and who she was, kind of what her game was. And I immediately said, I got to get a hold of this girl. I got to get her in the movie. So I spent like 3 hours trying to get a hold of her, emailing her, hitting her up on her Instagram. I found her phone number. I called her. I was like, please, just call me back. Get on the phone with me. Let me tell you who I am. We're for real. I promise. I promise. And finally, I got a hold of her, and I explained who we were, and I got her to say yes. But I said, okay, cool, great, you're gonna do it. And she said, but you should know something. My visa's expired in 2 days, and so I leave the country in 2 days.
Oh, wow.
And I said, okay, great. Well, where in the country are you? She said, I'm in Brooklyn. I said, we're in Connecticut. I will see you tomorrow. And we went there, we interviewed her, and the next day she left the country.
That is amazing, because I really, really liked her segment. Like, her viewpoint, her board game was just so different. And, it was really a nice segue into kind of some of the cultural issues that she's dealt with growing up, and, how she kind of still pursued her dream despite them, and even used them to kind of create this experience. So that's amazing. I'm really glad that you had her in there.
Yeah, I keep thinking about it, like, who knows, where she could have been in the country. She could have been in Portland. We could have found her a day later. And if I'm her, I'm not trying to do an interview the day that I got to pack up everything and leave the country. So it's like, it was very lucky that things aligned the way that they did.
And it really provided like a nice, temporal aspect to the documentary, where you see her before and then you kind of see her after she leaves America. It really kind of helps with the story. So that's crazy.
Yeah.
Was everyone else kind of more traditionally lined up, or did you have any other people that were last minute like that?
When we went to a lot of the bigger conventions, I knew there was a list of people that I wanted to talk to and just kind of ask them, even for like 10 minutes, just to have them be a part of it. People like Antoine Bauza and Bruno Feduti, who've designed a lot of games. We went to a booth where I knew that they had just made a game with that company, and I said, hey, I'm looking for these guys. Can you help me find these guys? And they're like, yeah, we'll just text them, because obviously they have their contact information. And I said, all right, come back here at 6 p.m. and they'll be here. And I was like, great, and so there was a lot of people that we ran into at conventions that, in my mind are a big part of the movie. Like those two guys are two of them. But, I'll say this, with making a documentary, if you're married to any kind of plan, it's just not going to work out. You gotta look for opportunities, be open to things happening, and just kind of ride the wave of what's going on.
That's good advice. And, I'm glad that you did, because one of the things that I really liked about this movie, and I highlighted in my review, is just the diverse game makers. And I drew parallels to Indie Game, the movie, which is another one of my favorite documentaries that came out, I think in maybe 2012. It wasn't that long ago. And no fault to the makers of that movie. They did a fantastic job with some really amazing talent, but every one of their highlighted game developers was a white male. Different levels of indie developers, but they were all white males. And this one, I loved the you had a Latino man, you had a couple of women, you had the Nasha, you had everyone who had these just very different life experiences and different cultural backgrounds. Is that just kind of luck of the draw? Do you think maybe that's just a sign of who plays games, or just did you actively seek out to try to get different voices in this film?
I tried to seek out who was interesting, but made an extra effort to seek out people who were maybe viewing the world through a different lens and could bring more of a unique perspective, had a more unique personal story. Because like, I love indie game, but it is it is all white males. And, you know, as you said, no fault to indie game. Indie game was one of the models that we use, like to make this movie, but it was definitely important to try to get, voices coming from different places.
Yeah. And I bet if they made the movie today, they would also try to strive to do that as well. But, hats off to you for really emphasizing that and getting a very diverse group of game developers. And I like also how you didn't shy away from it in the film. There's a statement in there about, how going to conventions, you kind of look around and just see how homogenous the board game community can be. And so I was really glad that you kind of made an effort to emphasize that diversity and bring that out so that people can see that. And maybe someone sees it and says, you know what, that looks like something I might be interested in. That person, has a similar background. That person has an interesting background. Maybe I could have something to say.
It is interesting that that you point this out. Like it is the crowd that does play board games. It is, kind of the same people. And I think the board game industry is somebody else that they're kind of having a realization that, like, what, we need to do more to attract different types of people, to grow our audience, to get different perspectives in there. And I do think a lot of people in positions of power are coming to this realization, and they're actively trying to make decisions to do that. But it's a very recent thing, so it's going to take time.
Yeah, it'll take time to even get those games through and shipped, and then have people pick them up. But and I guess that, the speaking of positions of power transitions to another thing I really liked about this film. It really got into the business aspects of the board game industry. You have interviews with publishers, you have, some information on how the money gets divvied up. Was that always supposed to be a focus, or did that just kind of come up as you were talking to people and kind of looked into their concerns?
No, I always wanted it to be a focus. I always wanted to illustrate the realities of, like, how hard is this actually. I think people see games that are smash hits, like a Pandemic, like a Catan, like a Ticket to Ride, games that are sold in Target, and say, wow, then they see the cost and they say, wow, this person, must be a millionaire. And most of the time that is far from the case. Because a very small percentage of that money is going to the creator of the game. And, not that I'm trying to discourage anybody from becoming a game designer if that really lives inside of them, but it's more like, these are the realities of it. I know, being a documentary filmmaker, or an independent filmmaker, you go through similar things, and being, a question that gets asked, I think, by every person in any quote unquote art form is, how do I make this my job? How do I make this my regular job, and, not have a day job, and, this is my profession. And it was always a goal to put those in realistic terms.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's also good, to kind of give people a sobering reality of what this is like. Now I know, it seems like that kind of model is similar in a lot of the creative mediums. I guess bands can go out and tour and try to get money that way. Video game developers can maybe do early access, or maybe have different direct to consumer sales and things like that. Like, is there anything that the board game industry or maybe independent developers have done to try to bridge that gap and maybe earn more money? I guess Kickstarter is one way, but I guess from your example, they don't get a ton of money from Kickstarter.
I mean, I would. Well, it depends. I know that there's one guy in Ohio who seems to have really, I forget his name, and I forget he's got the games that look like books. All of his games look like books, and it's kind of a great, branding. But I think he and his wife, who make those games, are doing quite well. I think it's Facade Games. I'm sorry if that's wrong, but they seem to have figured out how to go through Kickstarter and make it their job. And I would say to anybody who's trying to do this, look for ways to utilize crowdfunding in as if you want to go that route. And I'm sure if you ask them, they'll tell you that it's, you may get more rewards, but it's also a lot more work.
Yeah, I can imagine that you're kind of beholden to your crowdfunders, and I think maybe now it's changed. I've seen more people talk about how you treat Kickstarter as essentially a donation, and the timelines can always slip. But I know initially when board games were kind of being kickstarted all the time, everyone seemed to have unrealistic demands, and everyone seemed to want instant updates and things like that. So
Yeah, people treat it as a store, and I think people have a better idea of what it really is now.
and I guess staying along on the business side, one aspect I really liked was with Charlie's game Trekking,
Hmm.
uh, when he was just very frank about the realities of, this is how much it costs to make it in America. This is how much it costs to make it in China. This is the
Hmm.
backlash we haven't had happen, and this has allowed me to, you know, live and make more of this game and actually make this as a living. I really liked that aspect of it. Was that is kind of, I guess, was that just a lucky break for you, or did other game makers have similar stories like that, or did you just kind of focus on his story?
Um, I think, I mean, he was the only one who, tried to make it in America and then went to
Mhm.
China. I think it's still in there. Jason briefly talks about how I think he tried to make his game in America, Jason Serrato, and when he saw the numbers, he just realized it wasn't possible. So he never actually did it. Um, and as Charlie found out, making a game in America, it's almost impossible to turn a profit when you make a game in America.
Yeah, yeah. He said that it was costing what 3 times as much, and so most of that was just going to materials. And that was also an interesting aspect of this, kind of along those lines of the business side and the vision side. You had Charlie with trying to make it America. You had Jason, who originally wanted this, essentially dream game that he would have wanted as a kid until he realized he couldn't get it. And then you had Nasha trying to make her game in Pakistan and have running into issues there. So I think that, I don't want to say sobering realities because everyone overcame it, but just those realities of the business were really interesting for me to see, and kind of fun to, or not fun, but at least enlightening to kind of see the business side of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I think all of them knew that things are going to be hard and they were going to have obstacles they had to overcome. But and it's something that I hope that we can do with this movie. If anybody who's trying to do this is just like get a little more specific, like this is how it's going to be hard. So be prepared for this to come down the pipeline if you ever try to do this.
Yeah, I think that's a good reality check. Um, another thing that was really interesting with this film, because I think that maybe a lot of, at least maybe my audience, maybe the board game audience are used to this, but my audience might not realize how big some of these board game conventions are. And so seeing the convention scenes were also really interesting. I wasn't sure. Did you film at PAX? Because some of those look like it
We
might.
did not film at PAX. We filmed at Gen Con, which is in Indianapolis, and then we filmed at Essenspiel, which is in Essen, Germany. And those were two of the biggest, I think the two biggest conventions, and someone will probably tell me that I'm wrong, but I know Gen Con, the year we were there, I think it sold 80,000 badges for the 4 days.
Oh my gosh.
And Essenspiel, I've heard that they count their people a little differently, but they had, I guess you could say 150,000 entries through the 4 days. So those could be the same people, but they had, 150,000. That's the number.
That's huge. And I imagine that all that stuff has been shut down in this world, but hopefully at some point it'll
Gen
come
Con's
back.
going virtual this year. We'll see how it works out. Yeah.
Huh. How are they doing that? Are they doing like tabletop maker to do the games, or are they sending out like kits to people to print themselves, or?
I am not 100% sure, and I think we will all find out at the beginning of August.
Yeah, I think hopefully they get the feedback that they wanted, because I think was it Scott was talking about how he gets really good feedback from going to conventions, and I wonder if there's a difference if you're not actually feeling it and playing it. But
Yeah.
well, I guess yeah. Well, that and many other questions will be answered in our new world. Uh, I probably should have asked this at the start, but I was just so excited to talk about the movie. What inspired this documentary?
So my friend of mine and also producer on the movie, his name is Jimmy Nguyen. He's made two. He was a producer on two documentaries prior to this. One is Showrunners, about running and making a TV show. The other one is Barista, about the National Barista Competition. And he was kind of finishing up stuff with Barista, and we had been playing a lot of board games, and he kind of turned to me, and I think he probably thought about this a little bit more before he turned to me, but he turned to me and said, "Hey, I know what the next documentary should be." And I go, "Okay, what?" And he is, should be board games. Are you in? And I say, yeah, I'm in. And kind of started there. But he knew from his past experiences that if you're going to make a documentary, it takes a long time. So you better be in love with your subject. You better have passion for it. And that is why, he chose this for both of us, is because he knew that both of us love playing games. We had a lot of fun doing it. And, and this was like the next step after playing however many board games, like, oh, well, we gotta do something with this. We gotta turn it into something else. And, that's kind of how it started.
I like how I started the blog. Go to a bunch of movies. Like I gotta do something else after seeing the movie, I gotta do something else with it. So um, the time aspect of what you just said is interesting. How long did this film take to make? I think a lot of the footage was from 2017
Yeah,
ish.
the bulk of our shooting happened around 2017. A large percentage of the movie happened within a year and a half. But I'd say from the first time we shot till release, probably I want to say about 4 years, maybe. Things were a little slower starting, and then obviously when you finish up with post and sales and everything, things take a little bit of time. But I'd say the bulk, like, there's two answers. One is 4 years. One is like 2 years.
We'll take both.
Yeah.
um, and then another thing that I really liked is you followed essentially four board game makers through their journey. And it seems like at the end, spoilers, everyone, if you haven't seen the
Uh-oh.
movie, this is spoilers. It seems like everyone kind of turned out okay, or at least was progressing towards their dream. Was that just luck? Did you choose correctly? Did you actually film, 10 other people and maybe just cut the ones that didn't make it? How did that work out?
So we did film other people, but partway through we stopped shooting, because as you get more and more footage, nothing on those individuals, but as you get more and more footage, you kind of see how things fit together, and it's not a reflection on them in any way. It's a reflection on the whole, and the whole picture. So you make decisions on who to keep in, and I didn't know that if certain things, without spoiling it, certain things were going to happen. I had no idea, but I knew that these were our people, and let's ride with them till the end.
Yeah, well, it seems like we just have the right touch. Maybe you should go play the lottery or something.
I have a feeling my odds might be a little worse.
um, and then one thing I just had to it like hurt me internally when Nasha said this, when she mentioned that as a kid, what she would do is she would open the games, throw away the rules, mix all the pieces up. That is not how I would play games. That's not how I store games. Was that kind of a unique view for her, or was that just something that I guess what was it? Jason had a closet full of pieces that he pulled from games. Was that just kind of something that maybe a game designer's mind is built that way, or was that a common theme that you saw?
That specifically was not a common theme, but what is adjacent to that is kind of a common theme is a lot of game designers, on a lot of different levels, have played Dungeons and Dragons. And we didn't really dive into that with this documentary, because it is such a vast world that it would have been kind of doing a disservice to it to touch on it in any way without spending I don't know, over an hour on it. It's such a huge world. But a lot, what you're doing when you play Dungeons and Dragons is you are kind of taking the pieces of the world of your mind and making up your own rules as you go along. And so that, in that way, yeah, it was a common theme for everybody.
I can't wait to see your Dungeons and Dragons documentary. That is something dear to my heart.
Yeah, coming someday, maybe. Who knows?
And I guess the last normal question. The blooper at the end was awesome. I really liked it. If you haven't seen the film yet, save for the end of the credits. There's a fantastic stinger. Is there any more footage like that? Are there special features that you've released for maybe highlight other games or silly things that happened?
We have a lot of great footage, great for various reasons, that didn't make it in, and I don't know, who knows what's going to happen with it. We may try to put something together with it. Currently it's not a special features thing on the Blu-ray, but like talking with Eric Lang and Reiner Knizia, both of those guys are geniuses. The entire interview is really compelling and really engaging, and I hope that at some point we'll figure out some way to share it with the world.
I do as well. So now we'll move into I guess lightning round, rapid questions, whatever you want to call it. And I'm glad that you mentioned that you are a board gamer, because a lot of these questions are about board games. So, or I guess it can be any games. It can be board games. It can be card games, whatever you kind of want to call
Tabletop games.
Tabletop games.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
All right. So what was your first game, or at least maybe the first game that you can remember?
I mean, like most Americans, the first game I can remember playing is probably Monopoly. And I probably played it wrong, and probably didn't finish it.
I don't think I've ever actually finished a game of Monopoly. I think mine was the first one I can really remember playing a lot was Clue. My parents got us Clue, and my sister and I would play it and kind of compete and try to figure out who could get it first. I guess, what was your first complicated game? I guess Monopoly could maybe be considered a complicated game, but
I mean, the first complicated game, I think it was Carcassonne. It's one of those, the first Euro games to kind of start the wave of this new style of board games. It's a tile laying game. I still love that game, honestly.
I played that. So I haven't played that in person, but I played the Xbox version of it, and really enjoyed that.
Well, what's great about the Xbox version, or the phone version, or digital version, is that the scoring at the end of it is much easier because you don't have to do it. They'll do it for you. Yeah.
Yes. So I've played Catan on Xbox and Carcassonne, and just loved them for that reason. Like all the rules, getting the arguments with people about rules, you kind of get everything is taken care of, and you can just enjoy the game.
Sometimes when there is like a really niche like incident in a game, and I'm trying to figure out what is legal, what's not legal, I will try to recreate that scenario in a digital version and see if they'll let me do it, because if they let me do it, then it's legal, and if they don't, then oh no, you can't do it.
So you take like a 1 hour halftime in the game.
I do it after that game is played, and it's a rule for next time.
Yeah. What's your favorite board game?
I love a game called Dominion, and Dominion, it's a simple card game. Well, simple, that's a loose way to say it, but it's a card game that involves 10 different cards, and the box comes with 20 or more, and so that means you can switch out cards, which means there are variances to the game, but there's also expansions, so you can introduce new cards. So if you have all of the cards on all the expansions, there's literally a million different combinations, over a million different combinations. So that's a game I enjoy because you're playing the same game, but you're constantly introducing new elements into it. So the game changes, and it's a different experience.
Yeah, it sounds like you can customize it kind of how you want to play that time.
Yeah.
So I've heard of that game. I never played it. My favorite game is Ascension. It's a deck building card game. I played on my phone, and I've played on my phone for, at this point, I played it for about 8 years. Oh, go ahead.
I have to tell you, Dominion is the original deck building game.
Oh, well, there you go.
Oh.
I'll have to check it out. But it's a similar kind of game. You kind of draw cards, and you all start with the same hand, and you kind of pull the cards from the center and play them as you go along. So I guess, what is the strangest or kind of most obscure board game that you've played? And I imagine you must have some really interesting examples.
So I don't know if this is the strangest or the most obscure board game, but I will say this, that when I was explaining, as we were making this documentary and I was explaining it to people and kind of trying to open their eyes to, like, the world of hobby games, I used to say I used to say, like, you know with Kickstarter and everything, you don't have to go through all the channels, and you can make a game about whatever you want, and you ask the public, and you don't have to get one person of 3, 4, 10, however many distributors there are to say yes. You have to get, like, 1,000 people of the entire world to say yes, and that we have a bunch of crazy subjects because of it. And I said, think about, let's take the subject of quilting. Like, would you, a game about quilting? That'd be crazy, right? And they go, yeah. And I go, there are 2 games about quilting that I know of, and they're both great. So, that's the answer. I guess quilting is a fun one, but there's patchwork, and I think it's quilted. I'm sorry if I got that name wrong, but those are both great games. And that's something that's beautiful about the gaming environment that we live in, is that you can make a game about literally any subject.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think mine would be I played at PAX at late night in one of the free play rooms. It was a game called Legend of Cipher, which is it was a hip hop rapping card game that I did terribly at because I have no flow. But it was just one of those random, like, this doesn't seem like a game that I would think would translate into a workable board or card game. And it just it was a fun night that way. Do you have a regular game night?
Well,
You don't have to say when. You don't have to. You don't have to tell me. What's
Oh,
your address?
they'll know who
When?
wasn't invited. Oh no, no. I wouldn't say it's a regular game night, but I had a regular game group that met, a bunch, and before all of this happened, and sometimes we meet, virtually over the laptops, and play some games there, on Board Game Arena. And there's a new Codenames online thing that just came out, which we're all really excited about. So I guess the answer is yeah, regular game group, let's say.
Perfect. And I guess what was the last thing you played?
The last thing I played was a game called Azul, which won the Spiel des Jahres, the Game of the Year award, about, I want to say, 2 years ago. Yeah, it won it in 2018. Wonderful game. Wonderful, tile laying kind of resource management game. Highly recommend that one.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I guess any Spiel des Jahres games can be recommended. How many board games do you have?
I was counting the other day because I knew this question would come up, and I got bored and I stopped counting.
Make a game about counting your board games.
I think maybe, like, I want to say somewhere between 150 and 200, maybe.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Where do you store them?
and there's a big shelf, and then there's overflow, and closets, other shelves, multiple closets.
Under the bed.
Yeah, anybody who's really into board games, they'll have their main board game shelf, and then they'll have the closet of the games they don't play as much.
And have you ever designed a board game?
I have not. So I'm gonna leave that to the experts. I mean, if anybody knows how difficult it is, it's me now watching all this. So,
I feel like you can make a board game about making an independent movie, making a documentary. That feels like something that there probably already is one, but that feels like something that could be interesting.
I was at a party, and a guy said, "Hey, you heard what I was doing," and it's like, "I would love you if you look at my board game." And I said, "You realize I'm not a designer of any board games. I don't know how this is done. I'm making a movie," and and he's like, "No, I still want you to look at it." And then I didn't, but he and I are pals though, so that's fine.
Okay, well, that's good. This is probably an easy question. Have you ever kickstarted a board game?
I have not.
Oh,
yeah,
surprising. All right.
Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yes, I
Oh,
thought you meant like have I made a board game
made
to
it.
put on Kickstarter? No, I have kickstarted some board games, including two or three of them that are in the movie, and probably in addition a bunch more. Like I don't know why I thought you were asking the other thing, that if I put one on Kickstarter that I made myself, but no, I've kickstarted multiple board games.
It seems like Kickstarter was, real, for lack of a better word, kickstarted kind of some of these independent designers to really go for it.
Absolutely. This is something that Eric Lang says in the documentary. Uh, the crowdfunding and Kickstarter, it has done for board games what Pro Tools did for music production. It has made it accessible to people. You don't have to go through the guards, the roadblocks that you did before, and some beautiful ideas have come out of it.
Yeah, some very interesting ideas and very obscure genres. Um, how many games have you kickstarted, if you rough guess?
I want to say, and relative to some people, this is going to be a low number. I'd say probably 20 to 25.
It seems like a decent amount. How many of them have come to fruition?
I've received all of them,
Oh
so
wow,
that's a good thing. Yeah.
you have a good eye.
Mm.
I think you're lucky. You need to go play some cards, go to Vegas, do something.
I quit gambling years ago because back then I didn't have as good of a luck, let's say.
And the last question: if you could design a board game, what would it be?
Um, I would probably design some sort of party game because, you know, I enjoy, I think board games are different things for different people. I really like introducing people to games. I really like introducing them to having a fun time, and a fun time that they weren't expecting to have. And I think that party games are the easiest way into that. And you have a good time, then they kind of are open to a lot more ideas of like, oh, well, what other games do you have that's fun? We had fun with that other one. What else can you show me?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. You kind of get people to realize that you can just have fun in a group, and then maybe they'll try something different, try something outside their comfort zone.
Mhm.
Well, so awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. This is Charlie Mruz. He's the director of the documentary Gamemaster. It's available on pretty much every digital platform, so you can go out, rent it, buy it, see it with your regular game night, or just see it at home while you're stuck in quarantine. Thank you so much. And do you have any last thoughts or?
No, just thanks for all of your kind words in your review, and I really enjoyed your review, to especially that you compared us to indie game, because again, that was one of the documentaries that we looked at as to say, like, okay, this is kind of how they did it. What does that mean for us? And so to be compared to them, it was wonderful. It was great. Thank you.
Well, thank you for making it. It was a really fun watch. So everyone go check out Gamemaster, and go to watcherpass.com for any of your movie news, deals, reviews, or recommendations. And take care.